So the other day, someone approached me, a friend of mine. We were in the cafeteria of my university, and we were sitting and we were talking about a lot of. We're talking about the World Cup games that are going on, who's going to win the World Cup, who's going to be a dark horse. We're talking about school and the assignments we were doing, who had the harder courses and things like that. The usual university talk. But then an interesting topic came into the picture when we spoke about people who owned businesses and side hustle online. And to some point, we got to a specific point about talking about YouTubers and how these people could basically be described as just having a camera in front of them, speaking to a camera for 10 minutes or so, and then uploading a video, and then doing this every single week, sometimes every single day for some people, sometimes multiple times a day for others, and how they basically make thousands and thousands of rands a month. And then he asked me, he said, "Hey, Mentals, these YouTubers, they have a pretty simple job. I think I could probably do that myself, and I think that I could get successful or become successful at it pretty easily." And even saying, "Hey, I've been watching a lot of these YouTubers from time to time, and I really think that I could do things a lot better than them. I feel like I could make more interesting videos, I could speak a lot better, and all that wish wash, gish gallop, everything in between." And I told him, "Hey, when we look at things from the outside looking in, when we look at things just as a final product, it's very easy for us to think that in the case of YouTube, we can be as good as these people or that we can do better. But as I wish to do with you guys, I explained to him, when we look at people do some really impressive things, or when we look at people do something that's giving them some form of success, I don't know how to put it, but I hope you get what I'm trying to say. We think that we can match these people because we only see the final product. We only see basically 5% of the work, which is the final product, but we don't see the things that lead up to releasing that video. If it's a commentary video, it could have been multiple takes, numerous takes. It could have been hours and hours and hours of editing, maybe even weeks of research, months of research, whatever it may be. There's a lot of things that when we look at the surface, we can't see because they're underneath the surface. They're the deeper part of the iceberg, and we can't see that unless we take a deep dive and look into, oh, if I want to become this, this is actually what it takes. And this isn't even the first time I've had a conversation like this with people that I care about. Another time I spoke to an uncle of mine who owns a business, and not the classical online business like a drop shipping or selling courses online and things like that, or even some form of social media, just a classical business where it's offline, you have a product, you sell it to people, and you make a profit, or you hope to make a profit at the end of the day. And he's in the restaurant business. And one thing that I spoke about was how in the restaurant business and in the food service industry, and I think in any service industry, you usually have to deal with some pretty difficult customers. I was basically talking about how on the surface, when you look at what it takes to run a restaurant, and it's not even a big restaurant like a Wimpy or a Nando's, just a regular, maybe let's just say a takeaway shop. I talked about how on the surface it seems pretty simple. You just make food, you sell it to someone, it tastes good, and they give you money. I was foolish at the time. I was pretty young, and I told him maybe when I turned 21, I could start running a business like that for myself and maybe hire someone to run it for me and basically just scale a passive source of income like that. And then he sat me down and he was like, "Oh, Mentals, you foolish little kid. You don't know what you're talking about. But it's okay, because I'm going to explain to you why that's a lot harder than you think it is. You assume that you can do what I do, or you assume, maybe, because you're young and naive, that you can do it a lot better than I can do it. And I think that in other parts of life, this is a very noble and very good type of thinking pattern to have, because it may push you to become a lot better than you ever thought you could. It could push you to improve certain parts of your life. But let's focus on you saying you think you could run a business like that. You miss out on the fact that you gotta wake up early in the morning. But big whoop, right? I think you can manage that. You're still young, you can wake up in the morning. Waking up at 5 a.m. is not a big issue. But also, more than waking up in the morning, you need to find people to hire. And maybe even there you're saying, oh, to hire people, not too bad. It's just making chips, it's just making burgers and all of that. I'm sure you can find people who you can quickly train. Maybe even have the idea of just hiring your friends, whoever has free time, and maybe you get a really cool business that you scale as friends, and maybe you become the next big burger joint. Even beyond that, you now have to think about getting a supplier for all the materials that you're going to use to make those burgers. You need to get a supplier for cheese, for the patties and all of that. And you don't want to buy at a supermarket, because if you buy at supermarket prices, you need to sell at much higher prices, and you might price out a large market that you could be getting a lot of profit from because your prices are too high. As he kept explaining and explaining and explaining, I realized that, yeah, actually, this is getting a bit much. This is a lot more complicated than I thought it was. And then he gets to the last example I'm going to give you guys as well, but he went on and on and on. And then he was like, oh, we didn't even talk about where you're going to set your location. Where are you going to make these burgers? You need to be sure that you choose a place that has a lot of traffic, because if you're out in the wild, out in the corner of the neighborhood, then who's going to know you have a burger joint? Because I'm sure you don't really have a ton of money for advertising. And even if you did advertise, what are the chances that people in your city or town are going to see that advertisement, right? And then he's like, now that you found a location, well done. Now you have to worry about paying the rent, you have to worry about paying for electricity, and you have to be sure that this location you have found, that people around you don't mind you selling these burgers and things like that. And if you're in an area where there's other burger joints, now you have to worry about the competition, and you have to give people a really good reason to buy your burgers and not get food from other well-established restaurants. I hope you're getting it at this point, but the point is, we look at things from the surface level. We look at things that people do and they look very impressive, and we look at just the final picture of them doing it. But when we actually get down into the deep dive, into the nitty-gritty, it takes a lot more than we think it does to basically get to a point where we can become as good as them, or we can achieve the exact same thing that they're achieving, let alone trying to achieve something better than what they are achieving. Now, my own personal take on it, I don't think that we should just stop making this assumption, but we need to make it with a level of wisdom and a level of understanding to say that, hey, just because I can see it be done, just because my brain thinks it's possible for me to do it, it doesn't mean that it's so easy. And you need to understand that there are obstacles in the way to achieving specific goals and ambitions. And also, I think, just on a bit of a tangent, I don't think we should be worrying too much about the kinds of goals that other people are achieving or how they look when they achieve those goals. As much as I've talked about how we talk about businesses and we talk about works of production like making YouTube videos and how that takes a lot of time and energy, this can seep into any part of life. Maybe someone looks really good on an Instagram post. Maybe they have a nice car. Maybe they have a nice house. We don't really know if that car is fully theirs. Maybe it's owned by their brother. Maybe it's rented out. Maybe that house isn't even theirs as well. Maybe it's just a house that their aunt owns or their grandmother owns, but it's not really theirs, and they might be using that to convince you into doing things that you really shouldn't be doing when it comes to their content. The point is, we need to really think about what could be happening beyond the surface level when we want to make comments like that, and when we want to compare ourselves to the surface level and realize that there's a lot more below the surface than we would like to admit. I've said a few words too many times today. I've said surface too many times. I've said sometimes too many times. And now I need to move on, because I'm going to say too many times. Too many times. I do hope you did enjoy this video. This one was a little bit all over the place. I am still trying to work on how I'm going to make these commentaries. I'm hoping that I'm getting better at making these. You guys will be the judge of that. But that's the end of today's video, and I hope you really did find value in this one. I do hope that you are enjoying these videos. Until next time, I hope you have a good day.